Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And we're discussing chapter 36 this week, Secrets. Everyone's got a secret.
Yep.
Well, we start right away where we left off, where they are escaping. They're fleeing the Gemalian fleet. And we are with Althea.
Yes. Yes, we are. It's so hard. Sometimes it's really easy, first line.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's down a little bit before you're like, oh, yes, that's who's talking.
So Althea is on board Paragon. Vivacia is leading the way, and then the two regular pirate ships are following, and then Paragon is heading up the rear here. So they are pulling away from the Gemalian fleet. The Gemalian fleet has turned off their lights to try to flee or try to sneak up on them, but it's live ships and pirates who know these isles.
Right. And they're also sailing without any lights.
Yep.
But it's better for the live ships because they can actually see.
Yeah.
The pirate ships that are in between the two live ships, I think that's more luck, I guess. Or not luck, but experience, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the good eyesight that the ships have. But yeah, so there's a lot going on. They're trying to be safe. And Althea is reflecting on how Wintrow has seamlessly taken over on Vivacia's deck.
Yeah.
And this is a pretty big deal because, you know, it's what Kenneth saw in him that even his own family members overlooked. And she's really proud of him for being such a good captain, but also is sad that his father never got to see how good of a captain he was.
And speaking of Kyle, she reflects that she and Amber had unceremoniously just kind of tipped his body over the side, and Althea herself had scrubbed up his blood from Paragon's decks. So that's another thing that she doesn't know how to break to the Kyle's kids.
Right.
And she's probably going to keep a lot of that secret.
Right. Well, interestingly, she's only worried about Malta and Kefria in this.
Yeah.
No mention of worry for Wintrow or Selden. Which Selden, maybe because he's just forgotten. Wintrow, I feel like she maybe, this made me think that maybe she feels she could tell Wintrow what happened.
Either that or, well, yeah, I think I agree with you, but I was going to say the reasoning might be because he has already confronted what Kyle could be.
Right, that's fair, yeah.
And Malta idolized Kyle.
Right.
And Kefria, I mean, it was her husband of 20 years almost.
Yeah. Yeah, so not easy, but yeah, she's really struggling with that feeling of there's too many secrets now, and it's just too much, and she doesn't know what to do with that feeling.
She's also reflecting that Kenneth is a part of the live ship now, and yet she could not deny her bond with Paragon, so she's not really ready to be near the figurehead yet. And she's trying to look for Brashen on board right now, and she excused herself that Etta stood on the foredeck and undoubtedly wished to be alone. So she's trying to give herself excuses to avoid Paragon, the figurehead, at the moment.
Right. And I mean, they're pretty decent excuses, honestly. Yeah. Like, Etta probably wouldn't want to share this moment with Althea. So it makes sense to give her space, but it's also definitely just an excuse because she's not ready to face Paragon as he is now.
Yeah. So she does find Amber and Samoy, and Brashen eventually joins them as well. And they're kind of talking about the fleeing from the Gemalian ships and how, you know, the fleet doesn't look too good, but it's their right to flee because there are only 4 ships and 2 of them are limping.
Yes. Also, Althea noted that she could tell Paragon is feeling upset about the loss of the serpent because last chapter the white serpent died.
Yeah.
When it was attacking one of the ships to get the pirates free. So she can feel that mourning in Paragon as well.
Yeah. And strategically, she can also know that serpent spittle takes a while to eat away at things and it does damage the integrity, even if it doesn't seem like it. Yes. So as they're running, when they're eventually forced to fight, they will probably fight a smaller fleet.
Right, because the serpent did get the spit everywhere.
Yep.
So, yeah, by nightfall, there might be a few less ships, or by the end of the night.
Mm-hmm. And Brashen speaks up behind him, saying, well, the hope is that we lose them in the night. Even if we don't, Wintrow has hostages now. A shadow came over his face. I don't think he'll hesitate to use them. Hostages? Althea asked as Brashen came to join them at the aft railing. His face was gray. He looked as if he had aged a year in a day. Still, he put his arm around Althea and pulled her close. She hooked an arm around his waist. From his tone, she could not tell if Brashen approved or was horrified. At the last possible moment, Wintrow pulled a dozen or so men off the Gemalian ship. Nobles by their clothing. They should be worth something as hostages. But we're right to flee until we're in a position to bargain. There are many places to hide in the Isles, and we follow 3 ships that know these waters well. We may escape death today.
So that is something that's really interesting too. The perception that Wintrow has from Brashen. So Brashen is kind of treating Wintrow as though he is a pirate and that he's thinking the way a pirate would think.
And I think that's the conflict on his face, right? He is kind of proud of like, oh, that is a smart decision, but also like, wow, Wintrow is doing this.
Yeah, Wintrow's a respectable trader's son.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I find that dynamic really interesting because I'm sure there's a little bit of that inner turmoil that he has with himself playing out with what he's seeing Wintrow do. We know that Wintrow wasn't thinking of ransom at the time.
No, he was just saving them.
Yeah, but will he use them as ransom? I don't know. It kind of feels against Wintrow's code, but I guess to keep up image, I don't know. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah, if it came to that, I guess, you mean?
If that was for the greater good,
right, yeah. Well, then Brashen speaks to Amber and says, ornamental, and Amber is talking, trying to defend herself for the battle axe that Paragon took out and used. And she's like, well, I pinned it in place. I don't know what Wizardwood's going to do.
I never dreamed he'd be able to take it out and use it. She shook her head. The more I know of it, the stranger the stuff is, Wizardwood.
Lucky for us he could, Samoya observed approvingly. Didn't the splinters fly? And no one seemed ready to reply to that.
Yeah, so a little bit silly, but I mean, Wizardwood is harder than regular wood, so it makes sense that shaped like an axe, it would do damage.
Sure, but Amber's like, well, I pegged it in place. Like, it should have just sat on his belt the whole time.
Yeah.
But Paragon was just easily able to take it off and use it.
You know, I guess, to be fair, Paragon is the one, I guess, bringing color.
Yeah.
But I assume he helps make the carvings work the way they're supposed to. And I wouldn't put it past Paragon to not let that be stuck in place forever.
Right. Yeah.
Or, I mean, in his anger, I'm sure he could just rip it off. Not a big deal. I don't know.
So Althea is there in the silence, leaning up against Brashen. And she's thinking there is so much to tell him and absolutely nothing to say that was not said better with this simple touch. Clef appeared suddenly, and he's shaking his head. He says, in front of the crew and all. He disparaged them with a disrespectful grin. Althea essayed a playful swipe at him. To her surprise, Clef caught her flying hand and held it firmly to his cheek. Good you're back, he blurted. So good you ain't dead. As swiftly as he had seized her hand, he released it. How come you haven't said naught to Paragon yet? He's got a new face, you know. And an axe. And blue eyes like me. Blue eyes? Amber exploded incredulously. They're supposed to be dark brown, nearly black. She suddenly spun about and hastened forward. Wizardwood is strange stuff, Brashen reminded her smugly. Bit late to change 'em, Clef observed cheerily. Besides, I like 'em. They're kind, like mothers. He hastened after her.
So that's a cute little tidbit for rereaders and people who have read, I mean, I guess people who have read the first book and realize by now that this is
Fitz.
Supposed to be Fitz, that the eyes are supposed to be brown like Fitz's eyes. But I will say, we've had people write in and say that they read this series in order and did not catch that Amber was beloved until a second read through.
Right.
So there's a chance that some people still missed it, but I thought that was really funny that
Mhm.
like Amber's so upset that the eyes are wrong because it's
Right.
not Fitz's face.
But also in that paragraph, there is a reminder there because Clef is like, yeah, I like his blue eyes. They're like mother's. And we know that Kennedy was like, well, I have
My
my
mother's
mother's
eyes.
eyes.
Yeah, true.
So it's just another kind of barb at Althea here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that the blue eyes in Paragon's face specifically give Althea a hard time and she hates looking at them, but she never mentions that about anyone else with blue eyes. There's not like an aside of with unease she realized his eyes were blue or,
Yeah.
like
I think it comes with the knowledge that he did die on Paragon's deck and Paragon willingly accepted him.
yeah, for
I
sure.
think it's that kind of knowledge because she never mentions it about Mother, like
That's
you
true.
said. So,
Yeah, no, I thought that I found that to be a really interesting detail that there's
mhm.
that it's specifically Paragon's blue eyes that she has a problem with.
So she's relatively alone with Brashen. Samoy is still there on the helm, but only for an instant did her memory of Kenneth's assault intrude as Brashen kisses her. Then she seizes him and kissed him firmly in defiance, refusing any comparison between this and the pirate's attack on her. She would not let that stand between them. And yet when she released him, there was a shadow in Brashen's eyes. He was too perceptive. He looked into her face questioningly. She gave a tiny shrug. Now was not the time to tell him. She wondered if it would ever be the time to tell him all of it. And then she thinks that he's probably trying to be gracious and change the subject and says, why don't we go see Paragon?
Right. And Althea tries to squirm out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Brashen says, so why don't we go forward and assure Paragon you're aboard and well? He knows that I am, but for him I wouldn't be, she replied. The shock of seeing his eyes as he caught her had still not left her. Kenneth's eyes. She had nearly shamed herself by screaming as the ship's big hands had closed on her. She knew Paragon had sensed it. He had not paused, but he had set her swiftly into Brashen's reach. To Brashen's puzzled silence now, she replied, I will see him and speak with him in a quiet moment, Brashen. Not just yet. She made the beginnings of an attempt. Kenneth is part of him now, isn't he? He tried to explain it to her. Kenneth was a Ludluck. Had you worked that out? No, she said slowly. Kenneth was Bingtown trader stock? It appalled her. So Althea really hadn't put it together,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
I mean, is it? It kind of all happened really quickly. It was in the middle of a battle.
That's fair. You're right. I don't know. I guess, why would Paragon have taken a random stranger to
Yeah.
die on his deck? Like, I
True.
feel like that should have been a pretty good indicator, at least. But
Yeah.
I guess, it's
She's
in the
not-
middle of a battle and she's obviously struggling with her own stuff. It wasn't, I don't know. But I think hopefully, because I feel like there is a lot of sense of betrayal at Paragon doing that from Althea up until this point. So I hope that her realizing that it's part of his family makes it less of a betrayal for her.
Right.
I don't know.
And then Brashen explains that Ygritte had a live ship, and that was Paragon, and Kenneth was the hostage. Saw's breath. The pieces were all fitting now. Her mind struggled to encompass it all. So Kenneth came home to die on his deck, to be one with his ship. A little chill of horror ran up her spine. So it's even worse for her because now Kenneth's memories are in Paragon. It's not just, he died and was kind of taken on by the live ship. It's he is a part of the live ship now.
Yes. So someone else knows.
He always has been, Althea. I don't think his death on the ship has changed Paragon, save to put him at peace. He is finally one, a complete self. The dragons, the Ludlucks, men and boy, and Kenneth are all merged into one. She turned aside at that, but he put 2 fingers under her chin and turned her face up to his. And us, he said almost fiercely, you and I, Amber and Jack, Clef. All we have put into him became a part of him too. Don't turn away from him now, please. Don't stop loving him. She could scarcely concentrate on his words. She had dreaded telling Brashen about the rape, but had resolved she must. Yet how could she tell him without compromising his feelings for his ship? The convolutions of her thoughts dizzied her. And she basically just says, I'll try. Hold me very, very close.
Yeah. So it's an extra layer of damage that Kenneth has now done.
Yeah.
Because before it was going to be hard to talk about with Brashen, but not impossible. She does think that maybe she'll never tell the whole of it, but she can at least tell Brashen. And now she feels like she can't tell Brashen at all because what will he do to Paragon? How will that change his relationship with Paragon? And I think whenever she replies that she'll try to still love Paragon, I don't think that her love for Paragon is ever in question.
Right.
Like, she obviously doesn't like that Kenneth is part of Paragon, but I think she understands that they are also separate. But I think she's just so in shock right now of she'll never get to tell Brashen, and that's just one more secret, that it's just kind of like she's answering whatever. She's not really focusing.
Mm-hmm.
But then we switch over to Brashen's point of view, and it's really interesting because there is such a big miscommunication happening right now.
Yeah.
And we see that a little bit from Althea's side, but Althea almost seems to think that Brashen already knows and he's reacting to that, right? We keep hearing those little bits of like, he's too perceptive, he knows something's wrong, he's trying to change the subject. Not very, like pretty obviously trying to change the subject. But it feels like to Althea, they're on the same page. They know that they love each other, and there's something that she's not saying, but he doesn't know and he doesn't care. And then we come over to Brashen's point of view, and he does think he knows what she's hiding from him, but he thinks it's that she just can't love him fully because she has to go back to her ship.
Right, that she reconnected with Vivacia. And he says that Althea seemed to sense his thoughts, for she changed the subject and talked about the weather and what's chasing them, and it's just a very, very ordinary conversation, and that is discussing the obvious. And to Brashen, he says it spoke too plainly. She had been back on the Vivacia and found her heart once more. He could not blame her. Vivacia was Althea's family ship. With Kenneth dead, she had a much better chance of reclaiming her. And unlike Paragon, Vivacia had not embraced the anima of a murdering pirate who had done vast damage to Althea's family. When she had come back from Vivacia, he had deceived himself that she had come back to him. Instead, she had come to share battle plans. Watching the distracted frown on her face, he knew where her thoughts were. She loved him in her way. She gave him as much as she could without forsaking her ship and her family. He had no right to ask more than that. If he'd still had a family to claim him, perhaps he would have just been as torn. For a fleeting instant, he considered leaving Paragon to follow her, but he couldn't. And then he thinks about, what he started to build there, that nobody knows Paragon as well as he does. He doesn't want to abandon his crew to any other captain because he knows he can do it better and he knows the crew.
And he's thinking about Clef. Like, Clef is such a kind kid and he is on his way to being a good sailor. But with another captain, he might be abused. He might be hit. He might, who knows what will happen, but he wouldn't be treated as well as Brashen knows he can treat him. And just Samoy would never be first mate. He would, because he's too much of a drunk and doesn't have a good enough reputation. So he'd lose that and probably go back to drinking.
Yeah.
And he's just thinking about all these people that he cares about and has given a chance, and he does not want them to have to lose everything just so he can follow love.
No, as much as he loved Althea, he had responsibilities here. She would not respect a man who abandoned his ship to follow her. Brashen Trell was finished with walking away from his duties. Here he must remain, and if need be, love Althea from afar when they could. In that acknowledgement, he suddenly knew that he did have a family again. So it is a great realization on Brashen, even if it comes on the back of a misunderstanding, that he does have a place in the world.
Yeah. I think besides the fact that this is a giant misunderstanding, it is a really sweet passage. I think not only because Brashen kind of finds his place, but it comes with him caring about others, right?
Right,
like Clef and Samoy are both sort of outcasts in their own way. Clef because he doesn't look like everybody else, and
He
he
lost his family.
lost his family,
Yeah.
and Samoy because he doesn't have a good reputation from before, but he sees past that in people. And I think that's one of Brashen's really big talents, is being able to see people for who they are and not who they are said to be.
Right.
And so I think it's really sweet that in this moment he's like, oh, maybe I could leave my ship. And then he's like, no, because then what would happen to the people I care about?
Yeah.
And so I really like that aspect of Brashen. But it is kind of frustrating to once again have the misunderstanding of, well, Althea doesn't like me as much as I like her. And I find it
It's not
interesting.
quite that, but
Well,
it's, yeah. It's similar to that.
Yes. Yeah, I guess I'm simplifying it a lot. But I think it's really interesting because from Althea's point of view, before she's taken on board the Vivacia, they were on the same page. They loved each other so much and they're willing to make this work and whatever, but it doesn't really feel like they're on the same page. They both seem to think that they like each other more than the other one likes them. And I find that really interesting. But especially here, we have Brashen, who is thinking that all of this is because she wants to take over the Vivacia. And we know Althea's pretty much abandoned that. She doesn't really want to take over. I mean,
but she's never mentioned anything about it. So Brashen just kind of believes it in his bones, and that's what he decided over the next couple chapters. Honestly, that's kind of the attitude that they both take. It's like Althea, like, oh, Brashen can tell I have a secret, that something happened, but he probably doesn't know. And he's being a little bit distant, so it's my secrets that are driving us apart. And Brashen's like, she came over here to say goodbye, and she's being very distant, so obviously she doesn't like me that much.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really interesting. It's their typical runaround.
Right, yeah.
But also what I thought was really interesting about this misunderstanding, something that I didn't understand when I was reading it the first time, is why Brashen does sort of go along with Althea's insistence that, like, Kenneth is a bad guy, right? Like, up until this point, when it was her point of view, she's talking about how, like, Paragon and Kenneth are one, and, like, she says a couple things that seem like she doesn't like Kenneth, and he's never surprised. And so I was kind of, as a reader, first-time reader, thinking, why isn't he surprised? Why is he, like, not like, that's weird, that's something I should be thinking about? But then when you hear his point of view finally, it's, in his mind, it makes sense because of all the wrong that has been done to her family because of Kenneth.
Right.
And so he's only thinking, like, she has this really strong bond with her family and he's ruined that.
And it's, well, yeah, and he's a murdering pirate.
Yeah.
Who did break apart her family and, you know, kind of caused Wintrow to be the captain of Vivacia now. And,
yeah.
You know.
I don't know. I thought it was really interesting, though. And I also found it interesting to think about how Kenneth didn't really do that to Althea. I mean, like, didn't cause the rifts in her family. Althea doesn't have that strong of a bond with her family, right? And I think that's something Brashen just doesn't understand, which is crazy because he was literally disowned from his family. So you'd think he'd understand the complexities of familial relationships. But to him, they're family and she will do anything for family. And I guess she has said that herself, but it is clearly not true. Like, she wouldn't do what Kyle said for family. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just find that whole misunderstanding really interesting.
Mm-hmm. We switch over to Paragon's point of view, where Etta is standing out on the foredeck with him at the moment, and he makes mention that with no bond with her, he could not sense her emotions at all. And then she breaks the silence and basically speaks up, asking about live ships and how they work. She says, I know a little bit from Vivacia. And she continues saying, I don't understand how, but somehow Kenneth was your family, and when he died, he went into you? In a manner of speaking, his words sounded too cold. He sought to add something gentler. He was always a part of me, and I of him. For many reasons, we were bound more tightly than is usual. It was very important to both of us that he come back at the moment of his death. I knew that. I don't think Kenneth realized it until it happened.
Just a quick aside. I love the parallel with how he's talking to Etta. Paragon's talking to Etta with how Kenneth always talks to Etta, but it's completely different, right? With the "that's too cold, I need to add something warmer."
Yeah.
Kenneth always had that point of view because he knew that he needed to keep her on his side. And Paragon, I think it comes more from a place of having
Sympathy.
compassion.
Yeah.
And so it's really weird to read that and not feel the disdain for, oh, I must add something warmer. But you see the similarities between the two. And then also, I thought it really interesting that Paragon says that for some reason, because he doesn't want to explain it to Etta, but for some reason they're more closely bonded than most people are.
Yeah.
And they needed to be together. And I thought that was really interesting because it really did remind me of Night Eyes and Fitz.
Yeah. They're always too tightly wound together.
Yeah. And it's sort of that trauma that kept them together. Obviously, theirs is a different type, but it's really interesting the parallel there that I didn't really think about until Paragon says we're more tightly bound than others.
And honestly, it's not that different because they have both died and the other person has helped put them back together.
Yeah, they've stayed in the body of the other.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, you're right.
So she takes a breath and in a strangled voice asks, "So you are Kenneth now?" "No, I'm sorry. Kenneth is a part of me. He completes me. But I am irrevocably Paragon." And he says that it feels really good to make that declaration, but at the same time, he does feel sorry that that kind of statement is going to hurt her. And he feels bad for hurting her, which is a revelation of its own, because he didn't know that he could feel sympathy and genuine sorrow like that anymore. He tried to remember the last time he had had such a feeling and could not. Was this yet another aspect of being whole, the ability to feel sympathy? It would take time to adjust to feeling such things.
So I'm wondering if this revelation is coming from Kenneth's perspective, or is this genuinely
Honestly,
Paragon?
both, I think.
Yeah.
I think both of them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I guess Paragon has throughout the book sort of talked about how he knows he's making people upset, but he never really cares.
No.
He's like, whatever. It's all about how it affects me. So I don't know. But at first I was like, I wonder if this is like Kenneth pushing through. But I guess it could be the whole of the two of them, since neither of them seem to be able to experience sympathy before.
Right. Etta says heavily, "He is gone." "But why couldn't you heal him as Vivacia healed Wintrow?" So then Paragon has to explain what we know as rereaders and have kind of heard in other people's thoughts.
Yeah.
And from Vivacia's point of view, healing Wintrow is that dragons, and I guess Vivacia did this to Wintrow, uses the person's own reserves of their body, the energy they have stored to heal the person. And that requires a lot of energy and it takes a lot out of the person. And Kenneth didn't have that to spare. So
Right. And honestly,
Paragon couldn't do that.
right. And honestly, it's kind of a miracle that Wintrow survived because most humans don't have the reserves needed.
And it's very similar to what Fitz has permanently done to him.
Yes.
In the upcoming trilogy, I believe.
Yes.
Is the skill healing with the whole coterie, and he is then pretty much unable to be injured for a long time and then is super tired afterwards because he's just automatically over skilled healed every single time he's injured.
Yes. So I find that really interesting. And I wonder if it has anything to do with skill ability, like you're pulling on the skill talent to energy, I don't know, or like that energy to help heal.
I mean, it's that comparison, right? The dragon magic versus skill and wit. It's similarities for sure.
Definitely. I just wanted to point out that Etta knows that Vivacia is the one who healed Wintrow, not Kenneth.
Yeah.
Which I found really interesting because I believe it's Wintrow's point of view, or maybe it's Kenneth's point of view, but they talk about the miracles of Kenneth,
right?
And one of the one of the miracles is that Kenneth healed Wintrow, and so I find it really interesting that Etta knew the whole time that was not Kenneth at all.
Maybe not the whole time. She's been recontextualizing who Kenneth is in her head for the past week or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, now she is aware that it's Vivacia.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting because this whole time I'm like, everyone just is going with the fact that Kenneth is this miracle man, And maybe everyone isn't. Maybe it just, I guess there are
Easier
very
to
few
believe
people.
that than
Yeah.
try to delve into what a live ship is.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. So I guess, yeah, there are very few people who would have been able to know what live ships do and are capable of. But yeah, I don't know. That just really reopened my eyes to maybe King Kenneth did have a little bit more of a lofty view of himself, which is absolutely true. But it's really hard to know. He's such an unreliable narrator. It's really hard to know what people were thinking about him.
I mean, Edda out loud has professed that she believes like the miracles of King Kenneth in public. So I guess it's just a private musing.
Yeah. And I mean, to be
Realization.
fair, she's on his side and wants him to succeed. So she would know that that's good to do.
Would you know something about him, Kenneth? If I asked you something, could you tell me true? Perhaps, Paragon hedged. She had lifted her hands from the railing and was turning her bracelet restlessly, so the charm. Did he love me? The question burst from her, painful in its intensity. Did he truly love me? I need to know. So Paragon is trying to edge around this question because Kenneth is a part of him, and he does have Kenneth's memories, and she is pregnant with his child. It's going to be named Paragon. So he's trying to like edge around it, saying, well, Kenneth's a part of me, but I'm not Kenneth.
And he thinks that a child needed to be loved without reservations, before he says to her, well, she asks, if you have his memories, you know the truth. She insisted, did he love me? And he replies, yes, he loved you. He gave her what she needed to hear without compunction. I have Kenneth memories, but I am not Kenneth. Still, I can lie as well as he did, and for a better cause. He loved you as fully as his heart could. That was true, at least. Thank you. As clear and brief as a drop falling from the rain, the thought reached him. He groped for the source, but found nothing. The feel of the voice was oddly familiar, almost as if it had come from Kenneth, yet it was outside himself. So, Kenneth didn't love Edda. He loved her the way he could.
Yeah. As much as his heart could love. So his heart was pretty much incapable of love as we know it.
Yes.
But he cared for her and relied on her in some way.
So there was feelings for her, but I found it so heartbreaking, I guess, for Edda that we have to be confronted with the truth, I guess. Like, she's not confronted with the truth. She gets to hear that he did love her. And it's not the way most people would love, but he did in his own way love her, which I think Edda understands that Kenneth was weird. You know what I mean? Weird isn't the right word. He's
very
different.
Aloof.
Yeah, he's different than most people, and he showed feelings in a different way. So I don't think that put her off, and it probably really did help to assuage her fears.
Yeah, definitely. And then she wanders off, and Paragon is left with a mystery, which is the voice of Kenneth, but not quite Kenneth, from outside of himself, which is the charm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not like, I think the first time I read this, it was, oh, that's Kenneth's memories coming up and saying thank you. But no, that's definitely the charm from outside of Paragon himself. It's almost like Kenneth. He reaches out and says thank you. And then immediately after, Edda echoes that thought and says, thank you more than you know from both of us. So it's definitely the charm kind of speaking up and being like, that's the right choice. You know?
Yeah.
Keep this child loved. Keep Edda happy.
Yeah. Because I think the charm really does love Edda.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
We kind of talked about that, how the charm seems to be Kenneth, but with sympathy and then more aware of the dragon self than other things are.
Yeah. But I think it's really sweet that we have Paragon worried about the child in this moment, and that ultimately that's why he decides to lie. It's not necessarily to spare Edda's feelings, because I don't think Edda's feelings necessarily needed to be spared. I think she's a big girl and she could have been okay.
Yeah.
But it definitely had the chance to change her relationship with her child.
Yes, and now she can speak truthfully from what she knows, that yes, your father was a great man and loved me and was not a monster.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know. I think that's really sweet of Paragon to give that child the chance to
Hmm.
be loved to the full capacity.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously, that comes from his own experience of hoping that that would happen to him. But I'm glad he could give that to others. And I do agree with him when he says that he can lie for better cause, even if he can lie really well.
Yeah. Now, Paragon is pondering that, but sees some flashing of a lantern from Motley, and then is kind of surprised that he can now interpret those pirate messages and signals because he has all of Kenneth's memories, and he knows that Brashen is summoned to Vivacia.
Yes.
And Brashen is grumbling because he's like, this is better be good.
Yeah, because he's working the oars to get to the boat. So we're in,
Yeah.
I think, Brashen's point of view. Yeah. And he's mad. He is rowing a small boat with Althea, Jack, and Amber. And
Etta
oh,
as well.
sorry. Yes. Brashen, Althea, Etta, and Amber. I think Jack is still on the
Yes,
Vivacia.
on the boat. Yeah.
But yeah, so the four of them are all rowing a little tiny boat. I don't know what they're called, the lifeboats, from the deck of Paragon all the way up to the front where Vivacia is. But everybody's still moving, so they're not anchored. They have to do this while everybody's still, all the big ships are still moving, which means they have to work pretty hard to get there.
Yes.
Because they don't want to stop and let their pursuers catch up to them.
Yeah, and Brashen is looking around, seeing that like this was going to be a pretty precarious area to maneuver when the tides change. I hope Vivacia and Wintrow know what they're doing, but it seems pretty impassable at other times, so we might be safe if they know what they're doing.
Right.
And he's also approving the choice to put as much distance between the fleet and them as possible, but he still had reservations about leaving his ship to go to Vivacia. Althea had assured him that Wintrow could be trusted, but he reminded himself that they knew little of the crew on the Vivacia, or the captains and crews of the other two ships. They had been thrown into an unlikely alliance with the pirates. Memories of being under the hatch in a sinking ship were still fresh in his mind. Yeah, and that's something that's not touched on much because Brashen tries to avoid thinking about it, but he was through a near-death, harrowing experience.
Yeah, where his
Very
ship almost
recently.
killed him.
Yeah.
Well, not just his ship, obviously. Kenneth and his crew played a part, but
And now he's in an alliance with that same crew.
yeah, it's the crew that he fought against. So not looking great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, besides the fact that he's dealing with his own form of traumatic memories, the pirates are probably the best crew to have as your partner because I
Right.
don't necessarily think they keep grudges about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that he killed some of their people, you know? I feel like that's just the way of the sea to them. And maybe I'm being a little facetious, but it feels like that's pirate culture. So they're kind of like, oh, hey, you didn't die.
So Brashen, after Etta goes up, Brashen halts Althea and says, I'm going next. Any sign of treachery, you get back to the ship. And Amber's like, you know, that's a wise
Althea.
man. No,
Oh,
Amber says that's a wise man. Wise decision there.
right. Because Althea is like, I don't think you have to worry about that. And then he's like, I'm going to worry.
Yep.
So, yeah.
As he set his hands to the Vivacia's railing, incredible emotions raced through him. For an instant, he was unmanned. Tears stung his eyes. Warmth and welcome flowed through him, joy at his safety. He set foot on the deck he had not trod since the day of the ship's awakening. Brashen Trell, the ship called back to him in a low contralto. Paragon has done you good. You are more sensitive to us than you ever were when you worked my decks. For the first time in my waking life, I bid you welcome aboard. Thank you, he managed. Etta was nowhere in sight, and Wintrow stood on the deck in the pouring rain, offering him a hand to shake. The self-effacing lad he had met at Ephraim's funeral now stood straight and met his eyes. Heavy grief had aged his face. He would never be a large man, but man he definitely was. You remember the way to the chart room, I'm sure, he said, and Brashen found himself answering a familiar smile with one of his own. Wintrow's resemblance to Althea was truly uncanny.
So, this is really sweet, obviously.
Yeah, it's a great welcome for Brashen back on board.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know, because he, again, we just had this revelation with him where he does finally have a family and he feels like he belongs. And I think the last time he felt that way was under Ephraim Vestrit. And so I think it's pretty big that he comes back to the ship and she welcomes him and
Yeah.
cares about him and is glad he's
Mhm.
alive, because that was his life for so long. And it was the start of his new life, this changing his ways and putting him on the path to become a great captain. And so it's really nice that she's welcoming him on and he
Mhm.
gets to feel that. But also, I think it's really interesting to have his perspective of Wintrow, of this like little dude, and now he's a man. And I thought that was really interesting because not that long ago, Wintrow was talking about how he wants to be a man, and Etta said being a man isn't something that like
It's given to you or anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to make people believe you're a man. You can't
Mhm.
just want it. And then here we have Brashen saying he's definitely a man.
Right, right. Yeah, and so Brashen is on board. He feels welcome. He turns back to look at the other crew that came with him, getting on board Vivacia, and he sees Althea's face when she sets her hands to the rail, and he saw how she suddenly glowed. So again, there's that little dig there that he's like, well, this is her place, I guess. This is what she came for. And so he's watching when Malta came up to meet Althea, and they immediately fell into conversation, and Amber seemed less affected by her first contact with the live ship. It was when she set eyes on Wintrow that her face went slack with shock. "The nine-fingered slave boy," she blurted out. Wintrow lifted a hand swiftly to his cheek, then dropped it self-consciously. He gave Brashen an uneasy glance as Amber stared at him. It was only broken when Jack burst from the shadows to seize Amber in a fierce hug. "Ow, you look worse than I do," she greeted her as Wintrow hastily turned away. And Brashen is feeling mixed emotions as he's walking around
Right. So
because he sees that Kenneth had been a good captain and the deck looks great.
yeah, Kenneth ran a tight ship.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think this is really interesting. We finally find the nine-fingered slave boy. Well,
Yeah.
Amber does. We knew. But it's really interesting Wintrow's reaction to me, because he does seem really unnerved by this, like sort
Because
of
he
put
doesn't have
off.
any markings of a slave
Yeah,
anymore. There's no
true.
tattoos.
Yeah. But I also keep forgetting that he only has 9 fingers. Like, I don't know. That was such a big thing for a while. And now
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, yeah, he's missing a finger. So random.
Well, they all make it to the chart room, and everyone is there, including the Jamalian nobles who are lining the walls. Etta was there, as well as Rain, and Rain is trying to be unaware of the or the attention he attracted. Excuse me. The satrap was there, and the captains of the other pirate ships as well.
Specifically, the satrap was dramatically aware of his own importance.
Yes, yes. And Brashen, looking at the pirate captains, knows just by their faces that they have been made aware of Kenneth's death. So they're all in, and they're kind of getting some brandy glasses out and brandy poured, and Brashen can recognize that that's the good ones that Ephraim Vested saved for special occasions. And Althea rejoins him, saying, "The best of news. When Rain and the dragon left Bingtown, my mother and Kefria and Selden were all there and in good health." She took a breath. "I fear that is the only good news, however. My family is beggared, my home a vandalized shell, our holdings sacked. Now more than ever, a live ship would—" I'll tell you later," she amended hastily, as conversation is ceasing and Wintrow is standing up.
Right. And this really does set up more misunderstanding
Yeah.
because,
Now more than ever, a live ship would.
right.
Okay, because Althea is excited to take over Vivacia and be.
Yeah, be the captain and
Yeah.
get the stuff. And really, what she's meaning is if they can use Paragon as a live ship to
Yep.
do good or trades. So, yeah, it's a big miscommunication after miscommunication. And
Right.
it's not being helped by his preconceived imaginations of what are.
So Wintrow is at the head of the table, and he takes a breath and starts speaking. "I know none of you are easy at being called away from your ships. It was necessary." And he continues on saying, like, "This is what I'm going to tell you, that what I've decided."
I'm going to tell you what I've decided and let each of you plot your course accordingly. There it was, Brashen thought. The assumption of command and authority was in his voice. He half expected someone to challenge it, but all were silent. The other pirate captains had already deferred to him. Everyone waited respectfully. Only the satrap's satisfied smile let everyone know he already knew what was to come.
And Wintrow continues on speaking about how the treaty between King Kennet and satrap Cosgo is going to be upheld.
It has been acknowledged and approved by these nobles, which are the captured nobles.
Yep. So a shocked silence followed, and then both Captain Red and Sorkor leapt to their feet with cries of triumph. Etta lifted her eyes to Wintrow's face. "You've done it?" she asked in wonder. "You've finished what he promised us?" "I've made a start to it," Wintrow replied grimly. "My sister Malta has been instrumental in persuading them to this wise action, but there remains much to do." At a look from him, his two captains resumed their seats. Sorkor's deep voice broke the silence. There was fierce satisfaction in his voice. "When you told me Kennet was dead, I thought our dreams had died with him. I should have had more faith, Wintrow. Kennet chose well in you." Wintrow's voice was grave, but the hint of a smile played on his face as he spoke on. "We know these waters well. We've left the Jamalian fleet behind us in the dark. I recommend that as soon as Sorkor and Red return to their vessels, they separate and loop back through the islands and return to Divvytown. Send birds to command the massing of the pirate fleet. Then lie quiet there for a time until the other ships arrive." And this is where he lays out his own plans as well. That he's going to go with Sorkor on the Marietta to Divvytown.
Yes.
And also Etta and the High Lord Magnadon satrap Cosgo, as well as our captives' noble guests, he amended smoothly. And then he's trying to forestall questions and just finish what he's saying that the satrap requires our protection and support. They're going to mass their fleet so they can escort him to Jamalia safely. And then he can present the treaty and, have it be recognized by everyone officially.
It is really important that the satrap goes along on this, that and that the nobles come and that they get this done so that everyone can acknowledge what is to be the new norm through the treaty.
Yeah.
So it's a really important task and it is big. But also, just before we get into more of the plan, I just want to point out that Wintrow really has grown a lot and learned a lot through Kennet, because he is making really good leadership decisions. He is trying to take the course that will make the most people happy.
Yeah, for sure. Wintrow continues on, speaking about Etta. "Now, Etta," he paused and then plunged on, "Queen Etta, chosen by Kennet to sail beside him, and the mother of his unborn son, will go with us to see that the claims of the Pirate Isles are recognized. She will reign for her child until he comes of age." "A child? You carry his child?" Sorkor jumped to his feet and then lunged to engulf Etta in a hug. Tears ran unabashedly down his face. "No more swordplay until after the baby's born now," he cautioned her.
He's so sweet.
Yeah, and he looks offended when Red laughs at him.
Yeah, he's such a sweet old man, considering he's a cutthroat pirate.
Yes. "Kennet left us a son," Wintrow confirmed. His eyes met Etta's as he spoke. "An heir to reign after him when he has come of age. But until then, it is up to us to carry out Kennet's ideas and keep his word." And then Brashen can feel Althea's muscles tighten every time Kennet's name is spoken. Her eyes were black as she stared at her nephew, and they grip each other's hands pretty hard. Then the satrap, of course, can't be quiet that long, so he stands up and says, "Oh yeah, I will keep my word, and everyone is perfect, and I am super powerful, and blah, 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 blah."
"These last few days, I've seen for myself why the Pirate Isles have the right to rule its own. I must count on your support to regain my own throne, but once I return to Jamalia City..." Hey, what about Vivacia? He's cut off.
Yeah, Sorkor seems unaware that he interrupted the most powerful man in the room. Just like, why is everyone coming on the Marietta? And Wintrow is able to regain control before the satrap can continue his self-important speech. And he says that Vivacia has already a debt to fulfill. She has her end of the bargain. She's going to escort the serpents.
But he phrases it as though it's Kennet's other promise.
Yes.
So it's not Vivacia that wants to do this. This is something Kennet ordained, which I think is really smart because then there's no room for questioning with all these people who are so fiercely loyal to Kennet that, of course, she has to do it. Kennet
Right.
wanted him to, whereas if it was Vivacia's will, it'd be a little bit less sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's really smart of Wintrow to say this is one of Kennet's promises that we're fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. And then he says that I can't go with her, even though I want to. My duty is here. So I ask Althea Vestrit to captain Vivacia just this once. But at the end of the journey, she also had promised to return to Kennet. So she must come back. Vivacia must.
Jola has spoken for the crew. They'll follow her as that was Captain Kennet's will. However, I caution you, Althea. Vivacia promised Kennet that when her service to the serpents was over, she would return. And that, too, is what the ship wishes to do. Guide the serpents home, take news of us to Bingtown, but after that, you both must return to us.
Yeah, and Althea's about to speak up, but Wintrow holds a hand up hey, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're reading from Brashen's point of view.
Right.
And so because of that, Brashen thinks she's going to protest having to give the ship back, whereas we know she probably is protesting even needing to sail Vivacia at this point. Although I still think she would
do
to. Yes,
Yeah.
and she would. I think it's just something that it's because we're in Brashen's point of view, we don't really get to know what her thoughts are, which is unfortunate because I'd love to know what her internal monologue is about this.
And now Brashen is basically numb because he suspected it was coming, but it was just, it actually happening stuns him. Wintrow had just taken Althea away from him. Once more, duty to her family and her ship claimed her. She would have her dream. She would captain Vivacia. She would sail victorious into Bingtown. Afterward, she must return Vivacia to Divvytown. Would she then leave her ship to come back to him? He doubted it. He held her hand tightly, but knew she was already gone. It was hard for him to focus on Wintrow's next words.
Yes.
So everything has just been kind of confirming that she is leaving, that she's going back to Vivacia, that this is kind of the last time that, for now, that they will spend together close by.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because it is a misunderstanding at this point. And he does feel like she would never come back to him, which is funny because I don't think Althea would ever let someone else captain her ship. You know what I mean? Vivacia is her ship, and I don't think she would stay on board with Wintrow captaining her, even if she respects him as a captain.
Yeah.
I just don't see that for her. And so it's interesting that Brashen thinks that she would rather do that than come sail with him.
Well, with Wintrow claiming out loud, my duty is in Divvytown and here, maybe Brashen thinks Wintrow might give up the captaining or
As
maybe
long as
take over Marietta,
Yeah. But then that goes against his idea that she's all about family and duty, because if Wintrow's not going to sail the ship, why wouldn't she take it back to Bingtown and get to use it for her own means?
Then they're still apart because he has to sail Paragon.
Yes, but I'm saying
That's
in
the
this
point.
world, in what he's saying, it has to stay in Divvytown. It has to be...
No, not necessarily. She has to be returned to Divvytown, and maybe Althea would sail out of there, but she would still go to Bingtown and back, right? That's kind of the point. It's not going to stay in Divvytown forever. Still...
No. I don't know. I don't see... In my mind, it doesn't make sense to think that bringing it back to Divvytown means that she gets to be a normal merchant captain. That's not what Divvytown is. I guess it's turning into an island, so
It's
maybe...
turning into it, yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
It's a new kingdom, right? New trade. So Wintrow keeps going on for stalling Althea's response, saying that you and Paragon are free to do as you wish, Brashen Trell, but I ask that Paragon accompany Vivacia on the trip. 2 ships are better than 1. We need to guard the serpents.
Vivacia said that specifically.
Yeah. And then Rain speaks up, surprising them all, saying, we will need 2 ships against the Chalcidians, 1 to guard, 1 to fight. And then Wintrow's kind of dismayed that is actually true because he had heard just rumors. And Rain continues on saying, yeah, we saw whole fleets ready to take over stuff. They're going to war when I was flying over with Tintaglia.
And I suspect that Jamelia City is their target.
Malta's words followed Rain's. I see in your faces that you doubt us, but I saw their first attack on Bingtown. Rain was present during their last one. Your Chalcedean co-conspirators saw no reason to wait for you. They expected to claim the cream of the plunder before you arrived. Nor do I think they ever intended to turn Bingtown over to your new traitor sons and brothers. Cheated of the easy prey you promised them in Bingtown, driven away by Tintaglia, they now come south. Those are the allies you chose. Your satrap has been wiser. You have signed the treaty under duress. I can read your hearts. Given the chance, you will retract your agreement. That would be foolish. You should speed your satrap's alliance with the Pirate Isles, for when the Chalcedean ships and their raiding galleys arrive, you will need every friend you can call upon. Her eyes raked them. Mark my words, they are without mercy. Brashen is very impressed, saying that Malta's girlish cunning had turned into genuine diplomacy, and some of the nobles exchanged looks impressed with her words, and even the satrap seemed pleased.
Yes, and he also notes that it was just a year ago that she was hitting on him in her family home, and it's crazy how far she's come.
Yeah, so we now have the realization from everyone here that Chalced is going to war.
Yes, and not against Bingtown.
Yeah.
It is against Jamelia City.
Mm-hmm. We switch perspectives to Malta.
There's also a weird page break here that isn't normally, I don't know, maybe it's only in my version, but there's the 3 asterisks in the middle of the page.
Oh, yeah, that's not in mine.
Yeah, so it ended on Brashen's point of view, and then I guess it's the top of the page because it's the start of the next page, but there's these 3 asterisks in the middle of the top of the page for the page break.
Oh.
And I don't know if maybe it was just to show, because it is a different page.
A new page.
Maybe that's why.
I can imagine that would be just so they didn't have just a continuation and it was confusing.
Yeah. But it is a little weird because I think this sort of page break has been done in this book to denote that passage of time has happened between the breaks.
Okay.
And so whenever I was reading it, I was really confused because I was like, wait, has it been some time? We're just ending there? But I think this is just...
It's picking up pretty...
Yeah, it's immediately. Yeah, it's just seamless.
So Malta claps her hands to her ears before Rain heard the sound. So is it Rain's point of view? I don't remember.
Actually, yeah, we said Malta. I think it is Rain.
Okay.
Because it starts with Malta, so we thought Malta, yeah.
So it is Rain's point of view, and Malta is reacting before Rain is hearing the sound. And she's like, it's the serpent, or one of the Jamalians speaks up and says, it's the serpents returning, because there's a shriek. And Rain is like, no, it's Tintaglia. The dragon cried for help as she came. He moved toward the door, and everyone else at the table rose and followed him. So they all emerge into the downpour onto the deck, and Tintaglia is flying over them. She swung in a wide circle, then gave a cry again. To Rain's amazement, her call was answered. The ship's deck hummed with the force of Vivacia's reply. A deeper call from Paragon echoed hers. And Malta was frozen, looking up in awe. An instant after the sound died, she met Rain's eyes with a question. She asks for help? And Rain snorted. No, she demands our help. Tintaglia seldom asks for anything.
But he notes that as callous as he's been being about this, his heart is sinking with worry.
Right.
Because,
they're too close now.
Yeah, he spent too much time with her to not feel some sort of kinship to her. And he is worried about what's wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And Malta is adding in here that I didn't understand all of it, but I'm shocked that I understood any of it. And Rain says, the longer you are around her, the more clear it comes to your mind. I think our ears have little to do with it. That is interesting to me because Selden understands everything right away. And of course, he was there for the hatching, right?
Right.
Does something different. But Fitz, I think, understands everything right away as well.
Yes.
And some other people do as well. So Malta may not be that skill sensitive.
Yeah.
At all. We've kind of talked about that too, how these families seem to be very skill sensitive, and maybe Malta and stuff like that. Wintrow we know is.
Right.
But people who are sensitive to skill can understand the dragon easily.
Yes.
In the first try.
And I think the reason we thought maybe Malta had a lot of skill, because this is something we were looking for, is whenever she went on Vivacia's deck and touched the
Yeah.
deck and then fell to the ground in that skill wrestle or something.
But that must just be because Vivacia opened up her walls during the skill dreams and they had
Yeah.
connection before through
I
like
think-
the dream box.
I think you're right. Yeah. And I guess it wasn't. Oh, it wasn't Vivacia's deck. It was Paragon's
It was
deck because
Paragon's
Amber
deck.
was there.
Yep.
Right.
And Paragon noted that she has another like dragon claim to her and the
Yeah.
two dragons fought over her.
Yes. So I think that's where we were like, oh, it kind of seems like she's really sensitive. But also that doesn't necessarily mean it's skill. It could just
Right.
be sensitive to the presence of the whatever makes a live ship
Yeah.
work.
Because she was already dragon touched and already claimed in her dreams and had met Tintaglia
Yes.
in her dreams and head.
And in this chapter, we had Vivacia talk about how Brashen was now more open to the live ships than he
Yeah.
ever was when he was on her deck.
Mhm.
So it is a skill you can grow. And we know that's how
Yeah.
the skill works too.
Yeah, definitely. I
but-
just found it interesting that Malta wasn't hearing her right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because that's so familiar to a lot of our main characters.
Yes, that they just understand
Mhm.
immediately. Yeah.
Yeah, Malta just isn't as open or perceptive to that kind of,
hmm Well,
I guess, for lack of a better word, I'll say skill because
yes,
it's not
because
really
we don't
skill.
know. Yeah. But Selden wasn't either until he saw Tintaglia awaken, I guess.
Yeah, well,
because-
we don't know either, though.
Well, we do know that when Malta and Selden were going into the tunnel, he didn't hear any music and Malta did.
That's true. That's true.
He didn't hear anything. He didn't see the lights. He didn't know
But-
anything.
But we kind of figured, I seem to recall in that episode, we kind of figured that was Tintaglia still in her mind,
Yes.
luring her there.
For sure. I think she was definitely helping her navigate, but I think some of it was, I don't think
The
it was
city.
all Tintaglia. I think Tintaglia opened her to the city.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't anymore after this think that was her own innate ability letting the city in. I
Right.
think it was helped by somebody much more skilled.
So of the siblings, only Wintrow basically had predilection for the skill strong enough for it to manifest. And even his might have been trained up in the monastery.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, they all obviously have some level of skill aptitude
Yeah.
because they're able to become better and to train to become stronger and
Mhm.
able to hear the dragons. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting theory.
The dragon's vocalizations shook the sky again. All around them, sailors either craned to look at the beast or cowered under shelter. Rain stared up, heedless of the rain that pelted his face. He spoke loud to be heard through the answering cries of the ships. The dragon is exhausted. She flies too swiftly for the serpents to keep up with her. She has had to constantly circle to match her pace to theirs. She has not hunted or fed, for she has feared to leave the serpents. When they encountered a Chalcedean ship, it attacked her. She was not injured badly, but the serpents rose against the ship. He took a breath. They knew how to kill serpents. Archers killed 6 of the tangle before they sank the ship. The outrage and sorrow of the live ship rose through them. The tangle rests for the night, but she has returned to ask our aid. Darkness caught her on the wing. She needs a sandy beach to land on, or any beach with a fire to guide her in. Sorkor speaks up. Would muck do? It's slippery but softer than rock. Stink Island, Etta confirmed. It's not far, Red added. She probably flies over it each time she circles. Bad place for a ship, though. Shallow water. You can run a boat up on it, Etta dismissed this problem, and there's lots of driftwood there for a fire. We need to get there, now. Rand glanced anxiously at the sky. If we do not hurry, the ocean will claim her. She's at the end of her strength.
And that's the end of the chapter.
Yeah, so we get a lot of negotiations to begin with here. They're not quite done negotiating. It's just kind of the presentation of where they're at and what they
Right.
need to do at this point.
This is Wintrow's plans and what he thinks should happen.
Yes, exactly. And then the big problem of the dragon supersedes all of them for now.
Right. Because they don't want to lose the dragon
Yeah.
for each their own reasons, but I think mostly because for Rain and Malta, it's because they have that attachment to her. I'm really sad that we don't get to know how Amber reacts to seeing the dragon
I know.
at all, because I think she would have gotten to see the dragon during the fight when the serpents went away. Maybe, because I don't think Paragon was in the circle of ships yet.
Yeah.
But there's a chance she saw a glimpse of it. Maybe not, because she doesn't talk about it at all. But here, she absolutely is seeing the dragon. And so I'd be so curious to know how she reacted.
She speaks out loud next chapter, I think, but it's only like one sentence. So yeah, we don't really know much.
Oh, we need somebody closer to her. Where's Jack's point of view?
I know, right? Right. It's tough. But yeah, a lot of, a start of another miscommunication and thing here with Brashen and Althea that is very frustrating. And it leads to a very frustrating end for Althea that I'm not excited to talk about.
Yeah.
But in general, it is an understandable misunderstanding from a reader's perspective, because some of these miscommunications can seem very contrived to me. It's just like, oh, just talk. But this seems very in line with each of their personalities and what they have gone through.
Right.
Brashen is afraid to lose Althea, and it does make a jump, like a leap of, logic to be like, oh, she's leaving on Vivacia now and forever, and this is just kind of a courtesy call of like, hey, we had great times together, and maybe we do love each other, but I'm going. And everything after that, even though that first thing was a leap, everything after that confirms that thought for him.
Right.
All of the actions that Althea is taking, things that she's saying, things that Wintrow has said, all of that confirms to Brashen that that's what's happening. And Althea obviously just doesn't want to talk about things right away. It's so soon.
Yeah, definitely. It's just really a hard position for both of them.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think about where Brashen and Althea are at, or how the dragon is communicating with people.
Right.
And, just anything in between. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We are available to reach on all social medias, basically. At the handle is Fitzhappy on Threads, YouTube, Reddit, Facebook
and Instagram.
And Instagram, the two main ones.
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram. Or you can email us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com. You can also find us on our website, isfitzhappy.com. And if that link doesn't work, you can find us at isfitzhappy.podbean.com. And find different ways to reach out to us, because we love hearing from you, and we are excited to hear what you think of this episode. All right, time for our favorite part. We're going to bring some of the thoughts that you guys had to us back out to you guys. I don't know. I just randomly was thinking, oh, that's a weird phrasing that I'm putting out there, but whatever. You know what time it is. It's time for your thoughts. And we're going to start today with a thought from Spotify.
Yeah. So Heavenly commented on one of our previous episodes. It was episode 194. They're working their way through Mad Ship at the moment, almost done with it. This is on chapter 33 of Mad Ship, Proofs. And we had a discussion there about destiny and the kind of the similarities between Sa and White Prophets, and how they believe of, the importance of each and every thing in the world.
Right. I had made a comment about, in my read of the book, destiny is something that everyone works towards. It's not predetermined. It's not predestiny. It's just every person can have a destiny or a goal. Some people just have to work harder than others.
Yep. Yeah. And Heavenly is commenting that they agree with Emma's thoughts on there, that it's not the destiny that each person has would be due in their mind to the positive changes that they could make in this life, in this turning of the wheel or whatever it is. And you're laughing because you're reading Wheel of Time.
Yes.
But that's the active positive changes that they could make. And if they turn away from their destiny or don't fulfill their destiny, that could be the negative choices that they make. And it just shows that the wheel is stuck in that rut that the fool has to kind of force them out of, right?
Yes.
To make those positive choices. So
Right.
kind of piggybacking on Emma's thoughts there.
Yeah, and just explaining it a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, definitely that there's following Saw for a Saw believer is making the positive change. But turning away from Saw is not living up to your destiny. And
Right,
so,
exactly.
yeah, I don't know. I agree. It was a good way to phrase it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Heavenly.
And then we got a few messages from Instagram or on Instagram, DMs, I guess. And I wanted to start first with one from a listener, Aldo, who wrote in, and this is again sticking with the theme of previous episodes. This is from episode 40. And in that chapter on the episode 40, it's the first time Verity rides on Fitz's mind. And one of the details that Aldo noticed is that what allowed Fitz to skill was the trust between him and Verity. And it made them think that the reason Regal wasn't able to learn to skill is because he can't trust other people being raised along so many conspiracies. And they would love to know our thoughts.
Yeah, I really do like that because we've talked about the riding along with your awareness and having that physical touch makes it easier to do that. And then later on, we compared Regal with the coterie,
Yes.
kind of riding along or being a parasite to Will, and it's just a little bit different
Yes.
in that way. So I really like this thought here and comparison that being connected with the skill with somebody is such a trusting exercise. You're open to them completely. And I think Fitz talks about that with Galen during his training too, how
Yes.
you have to be completely open. And Galen was just rifling through everything. So obviously the trust was not there.
Right.
And your mind works hard to shut itself down. But with Verity, it was just so easy.
Yeah, because there is that trust and love between them, which is ultimately really sad that Regal truly had nobody that he could trust, even with his brother, like or half brother, I guess. But yeah, I really like that theory. I like the idea that it is really trust based and that that's what's hindering Regal is his lack of trust in others.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you, Aldo. Coming back to the more recent ideas, we had a DM from Audrey who was talking about Wintrow's attitude after Kenneth's death that we discussed in episode 239. And they are saying that maybe Wintrow's using Kenneth's good acts and didn't mention the bad to shape the legacy how he sees fit to make him good and make it a good legacy, not only for Etta's sake or his own sake, but for the sake of the child who's going to grow up in the legacy.
Right.
But that's thinking really far ahead to the future. And in the moment, he should have been more cognizant of how he was treating his aunt.
Yeah, and how, at least in private, have some discussions with her, which, yeah, we've talked about a lot too. So thanks for bringing it up again, Dre, there. But it's important to kind of hammer home, right?
Yeah.
That Wintrow could have good intentions for this, even though it doesn't seem like he does in the books.
Yes.
At least he's not that forward thinking in the books, it seems like. He could have good intentions, but still those good intentions don't amount to much if there's no comfort given, if there's no belief in one side, there's no expressing of your true feelings.
Exactly. And it's still bad that he waited for his crush's approval to believe his aunt, as Audrey says. So, yeah, very good points there. And I think that is a good way to look at it, that potentially it wasn't about Althea. Obviously, he wasn't really putting Althea first, but potentially that's because he was putting Kenneth's child first.
Yeah,
which
could be.
You know.
In my read of the book, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like he's just grappling with his own feelings of like, well, this means that I was wrong following through things.
Yes.
Which, fair for a 15-year-old. You're still kind of like trying to find your place in the world. But it is a more positive read.
Yes.
On his reactions.
Definitely.
So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then the final Instagram DM is from Peculiar Ponies, and it is to
Answering our call. Yeah.
Yes, answering our call, explaining the question of why a chunk of hair would turn gray when you're harmed, like Fitz has. And according to Peculiar Ponies, the white hair after a head injury is because of scarring. Scarring does something to the pigment in the skin and hair, so on a less hairy area, it wouldn't show, but on your head, it attracts more attention. When you have a scar, the result in a loss of pigment in the is a result of loss of pigment in the hair. So it only happens when there is a wound that results in a scar, not when the skin isn't harmed. Nowadays, people get stitched up, so the scar area isn't as wide and we don't see it a lot. I assume I'm teaching biology, not no medical degree here.
Yeah.
So that was Peculiar Pony's answer, which...
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I will take that as... You know,
it's the fact.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool, though. It's really fun to know that that's why you would see that, and also why you don't see it as much anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's even cooler to think about. But yeah, thanks for answering that. We love to learn science facts. And finally, we have an email from Jess. And Jess did have some comments about sci-fi from a question that we got a week ago. I'm not sure. Time is an illusion. But Jess wrote in to talk about how they don't read a lot of science fiction, but that they second Andy Weir and Martha Wells. They also said they'd like to add Becky Chambers to the list of great sci-fi authors. Fantastic world building, and she has an imagination that's out of this world. She nails inclusivity, and her books are incredibly heartwarming. So
great recommendations there. I guess I am good with recommending Martha Wells. I haven't read Murderbot yet or anything like that, or any other works that she's done, but I've heard great things. So I'm glad that somebody else can echo that.
Yes. Also fun. I don't know. Maybe I should try sci-fi. Well, maybe I'll like it.
Yeah.
But Jess also wrote in to talk about the last chapter where Kenneth died. And it's unbelievable how touching Kenneth's death was, considering everything that's happened. So well written.
Yeah. And I mean, we were kind of in awe of that as well, because it is crazy that Hobb can evoke so much emotion in you in such a despicable person.
Yes. Yeah. And it's because we've been in his head, right? We know him and we know how bad he's been all along. But yeah, that moment of death where you still feel something is pretty big. Mm-hmm. So
I do have to give a final shout out to Heavenly. They commented on another episode on Spotify that I put Burek in one of the descriptions instead of Brashen, and they were cracking up about that. So
nice.
Fixing that right now, just as a heads up.
So yeah, thank you everybody who writes in, and thank you for giving us your thoughts, whether it's about sci-fi books or something in the chapter or whatever. We love hearing them. We love your theories. We love your thoughts, and we love the little community we have. So we look forward to hearing from you next week.
Thanks so much.